Good evening and welcome to the panel room. Tonight we're going to be talking about how we as authors and creatives can work with our podcasters, our book bloggers, and other creatives in the field. How do we start working with and building community? And who are some of the other people that really help influence the community? So tonight I'm going to go around and have my panelists introduce themselves. PJ, we'll start with you.
Hi, my name is PJ Ausdenmore. I run a blog called The Romance Dish. I have been formally reviewing books since 2007, and I have been running the blog since 2009, so for 11 years now. I do book reviews, book spotlights, author guest posts, and author Q&As. I'm also active on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram.
Jeff.
I'm Jeff Adams. I'm one half of the Big Gay Fiction podcast. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary in November. We've done over 275 weekly episodes, never missing a beat since we started in November of 2015. And every week we're out there with author interviews, with book reviews. We also look at other pop culture that has LGBTQ plus representation. So we're always looking at movies, at theater, things like that. My husband and I also are authors in the gay romance space also.
And Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay. I run an LGBTQ romance review blog called Joyfully Jay. We are 9 years old, celebrate our 9-year anniversary in September. We run book reviews. We do about somewhere between 15 and 20 a week. I have 9 reviewers who write for me on the blog. We also host authors every day, Monday through Friday, for a guest post or some sort of promotional post. And then we do a variety of other activities, giveaways, events. We have a big challenge month every year, and other events and activities throughout the year, throughout the week.
And of course, I'm Jim Nettles. I am science fiction and fantasy author, a bit of horror, as well as nonfiction. I write a bunch of technology, business, futurist type stuff. So I'm kind of all over the place. So let's sort of start. Jay, I'm going to pick on you first.
Sure.
How did you decide that you wanted to get into this side of the blogging game? How did you pick what genres you wanted to work in, what you were interested by? And then I think also, how do you also then find some of the reviewers you want to work with?
Sure. So I started blogging because I was an active romance reader at the time, and I was reading a lot of other blogs and review sites, and realized, as with many things, I had so much to say and wanted to give my opinion on everything, and decided that rather than just commenting on other people's blogs, that I would start my own. So originally, it was not intended to be a book blog, which is why it doesn't have a book blog name. I sort of imagined it would be my thoughts on random things, but honestly, within like 3 weeks, it became almost exclusively a book blog, because I had reached out to some authors and started reviewing books, and pretty soon that was consuming just about everything. So it's been a book blog pretty much since day 2, I would say. And I chose blogging, honestly, because at the time it was all I knew. Podcasting was not nearly as prevalent as it was now, so it was not anything I really considered. And I did start out with just me. Probably for the first, I would say, 8 months, it was just me writing a review, once or twice a week as I was reading. But I reached the point where I had enough authors reaching out to me with books for potential review that I was exceeding my own personal capacity, and brought on a couple of reviewers. And then over the years, it's grown and grown and grown. And as I said, I have 9 people on my team now who review for me. And so that makes it really nice, because we unfortunately still have more requests than we can meet demand, but it really gives us the chance to have a broad range of books. And really, although we do sort of stay under the LGBTQ umbrella, and almost primarily romance, we still have then the chance to do some nonfiction and some literary fiction and some other areas, because I have a big enough team that we can sort of delve into things that people are interested in as we were reading. Did I answer all your questions? I can't remember if you had one more.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There's probably going to be slipping one more in there somewhere.
Oh, bless you.
So Jeff, from you guys in the podcast, so how'd you and your husband decide to start this one? And why podcasting?
Well, at the time in 2015, there were a lot of book blogs back then. Jay is certainly one of the long runners in the LGBTQ romance blog space, but there were already a lot of blogs, and we listened to a lot of podcasts, and we were already talking amongst ourselves about books. So, one of our first thoughts was, well, why not record that? And there was really nobody else in the space then. Romance podcasts overall have exploded over the last 5 years that we've been in the game. But it's still LGBTQ romance podcasting is super niche. And so it was a good place to kind of go out there and record our thoughts and just, start to have the conversation of, we like these books. We're going to talk about these books. We're going to find some authors who want to come talk about these books. And, 5 years on, we don't see an end in sight, because it just keeps, luckily, growing. People are still discovering us. And, we have a good time with it.
So PJ, what about you?
Well, back in 2005, 2006, blogs were the primary online vehicle for sharing book reviews and talking about books. And I was active on as a commenter on several of them. In 2007, I was asked to join the review team for one of the sites. And I reviewed for them for 2 years. I'd never done that before, although I was very good at informally sharing my thoughts about books with all of my friends. So I reviewed there for 2 years, and then they decided to shut down their site. I discovered, like Jay, that I had a lot more to say, and I was having way too much fun to stop that. So with 3 other fellow readers, we decided to open our own blog. And that's what we did in November of 2009. And then over time, the other 3 decided that they wanted to move on to other things, and I continued to run the blog on my own. I've had other reviewers on my team for a while now, ranging from 3 to 6 reviewers at a time. Currently, I have 3 others who do regular reviews for me. And that's pretty much what I do and how I got there. I don't do podcasts because I do much better writing than I do talking. So I leave that to people like Jeff who are good at it.
I've got technology that just makes it look like I'm good at it.
Well, then you have very good technology because you do a great job.
The joys of technology. So it sounds like everybody really is coming at this because of a love of books. I mean, it's really, it's much like a writer. If you could find any other way to do it, you would do something other than being a writer. But if you can't help yourself, you become a writer. Mm. So when you guys are looking at what you're wanting to do and your opinions and starting to spread that out there, Jeff, I'm going to start with you on this one. Is this one of those things that you had a little bit of reticence about coming in saying, here's my opinion about this. Here's what I think about these books. Here's what I think about these writers, even within the niche, especially if you're as early as you were starting that podcast side of things. So how did that handle for you from that visibility standpoint and wanting to actually put yourself out there?
I'm not sure we actually thought about it from that point of view. If only because there was nobody else really in that niche talking about it. If there could have been some imposter syndrome around that, I suppose, if there'd been, other shows who had been in that niche already, it's like, well, should we be doing this, while these folks are handling the area so well? But I think podcasting is also much like blogging was back in the day. It's really a level playing field. It's like, if you have an opinion, you can have a blog. If you have an opinion, you can have a podcast. People who like your opinion are going to hang around. If people don't like, what you're putting out there, they're going to go find, something else that's going to, align with them. And I think we try to cover really fairly broadly. Between Will and I, we read slightly different parts of the genre. We do overlap in a few places, but there's other places that we spread out. Plus, we have folks like Jay and Lisa from the Novel Approach who come onto our show to further broaden the books that we talk about. So it's not just totally us bringing our opinion to the table, but we are also quite curated. So if we don't like a book or it just doesn't fit with us, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to try to review something that we don't like. So there's a little bit of that curation thing going on, which is different from some of the bloggers, because from a blog point of view, often, you could sign up, get a guest slot, request a review. You may or may not get that review. But for us, it's really a tighter ecosphere, especially because we have such limited space. We put out about an hour of content a week. So we're not going to put out something that we're not excited about. And the people who are excited by what we're excited about, come this way and we'll keep talking about it, essentially.
I don't know if this is what you were getting to, James, but I think there's also a little bit of a difference, maybe coming at this as exclusively a blogger versus a blogger and author like Jeff. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that, Jeff, you just mentioned in your case, you guys are very curated and you tend to focus on things that you like and are excited about and want to promote. And I think that's a different dynamic than you might get as a blogger who doesn't have that dual role where you're sort of, there's a lot of questions, I guess, about having, authors out there negatively reviewing or potentially negatively reviewing fellow authors. And I think that in my situation, it's a little bit clearer a line because we are able to review sort of from purely a reviewer sense rather than mixing those two things together.
I agree with Jay.
It's interesting you bring that up too, because one of the things that factored into our curation wasn't, there's certainly that idea of authors reviewing other authors poorly that we didn't want to get into. Mm-hmm. But frankly, there's also, life is too short to read a book that we're not into. And where you might pull through that if you're trying to actually review it. We're more about, okay, that didn't work for me, put it aside, move to the next.
Yeah.
If I encounter a book like that, if it's not a book that I have committed to review at my blog, I'll review it at Goodreads. Mm-hmm. What I want to share with my regular readers at my blog are books that I enjoy, that I think they'll enjoy, or books that I've read that may be out of their normal reading comfort zone that I want to introduce them to, that I want to open their minds to. Not so much as a strictly narrow focused review site, but more as a sharing site. Here's what I loved about this book. Yeah, this might not have worked for me well, but this part did work well, and I think you might enjoy it too. Mm-hmm. And I do try to review different types of books within the romance genre and also outside of the romance genre to open that scope of reading for the regulars at my blog.
In our case, we probably about 95% of what we review are direct requests for review from either authors or publishers, or in some cases, books that we have sought out for the purpose of review, where we'll reach out to an author and say, hey, I heard this is coming out and you didn't send in a request, but would you be interested in sharing it with us? So our policy is a little bit different because we have sort of had that agreement with the author upon getting the book that we intend to review it. So we review, our policy is if we start the book, we review the book. Sometimes there's a DNF here and there, which I consider a review because we do write the DNF up and explain why. But I think on my perception has always been the reader audience. And I very much try to think of what information am I giving the reader? And even if it's that we didn't particularly like this book, it might be that information that they need to decide that no, it's not for them, or that maybe it is for them. But ultimately, what I try to keep in mind, especially when we don't have a review that's as positive, because it's always difficult. It's difficult for us, it's difficult for everybody. is that my audience is that reader with their limited book budget who's looking for information to help them decide what to buy. And that might not coincide with whether I like it or not. Lots of things one reviewer likes, the other doesn't, and vice versa. But I want to be able to give them my honest opinion and information so they can make that choice. So even if, you know, I don't love it, it might be something that's perfect for them. And I always laugh because one of a series I really love, one of my reviewers read the book. It was a DNF for her. It was more related to the sexual content than it was to the story itself. And so I was so intrigued, honestly, by her DNF review that I reached out to the author and I said, I know this is really weird, but would you mind if I tried it? And I ended up reading the book, loving it, reading all the subsequent books in the series. So, I mean, that's even among the same blog. We came from two totally different perspectives. So I'm of the firm belief that there is somebody for every book. And my goal is to help you figure out if that somebody is you.
I agree with that.
That's a good tagline. You should use that.
Yeah.
Because I said it. Why are they not marketing that?
Well, it's kind of like, I remember my first 1-star review I got, and the only thing they said was I didn't get it. And I wrote a blog post, because what else are you going to do as a writer? I wrote a post thanking them for the review, and I acknowledged, you're not my reader for this book or this series or whatever the case was. And I was perfectly fine with that. And so because we all know it boils down to people's tastes and people's opinions and what they want to see and what they want to read. So it's kind of where I wanted to go next is, what do you do with those stories that you absolutely love and the ones that you don't love so much, making sure that you're giving people, this is still my opinion, and you know that your own tastes are feeding into that. Because that's one of those things that obviously your followers come to you for, is what your tastes are, what your opinions are. So PJ, let's start with you for that one.
Well, I try to be very transparent. First of all, I don't give any spoilers, but without giving spoilers, I tell them this did not work for me, and this is why it didn't work for me. However, it may work for you. I try to be as specific as I can without giving away the plot of the book and saying why it didn't work for me. I always talk about the book. I never bash the author. I never, try to be negative toward the author. I try to be constructive with what I have to say about the book. But I have several reviews where I might give them a 3. Occasionally they might get a 2 for a book. And I always try to find something positive within the review to spotlight, as well as talk about why the book didn't work for me. But I never tell my readers, don't read this book, because like Jay said, a 2-star for me might be a 5-star for another reader. Mm-hmm. And I don't presume to tell readers what they should read.
So what do you want to add to that, Jay? I mean, from your perspective, because you guys have doesn't matter, we're going to leave a review. Right. I know that there are some reviewers that, say, if I didn't finish it, or I don't like it, or if it doesn't fit, we're only going to tell people about the things we liked. Right. You guys are not coming from that perspective. So
yeah. And I always sort of feel like I don't want to feel like I'm hiding a book from my reviewers, because ultimately they're my audience. But I think what we try to do, whether we liked a book or didn't like the book, and regardless of the rating, is to try to help people understand not just what the book is about, but what type of book it is and who might be the right audience for this. Sometimes you're in the mood for that light and fluffy, sugary sweet curl up, in front of the fire book. And sometimes you're in the mood for that high octane urban fantasy book. And I think trying to, incorporate in our reviews the idea of, who do we think this is best suited for? It may not be me. I have certain tropes that I just don't love, and it has to be done really well for the book to work for me, but that are catnip for other people. And so even if I'm saying, I'm not sure this was up my alley, somebody else could read that book and review and understand why it might be right for them. So we do try to sort of give this might be for you if, statement in there somewhere to help people figure out if that might be something that works for them, for the good or the bad.
What about you, Jeff?
It's interesting between the two kinds of books that Will and I tend to review. He is much more on the contemporary romance line. And it's hard to spoil those because they must end in the HEA. So you really always know at the end, there's going to be happy over there. For me, I can do more like romantic suspense is a big thing for me. So I'm very careful talking romantic suspense because I don't want to screw up the suspense plot for anybody. But for me, it's really all about what I liked about the book. Occasionally we'll both, if there's something weird in the book, we might call it out as like this little thing here didn't quite work or was a little strange or something. But, like I said before, we're all about, we love the books we're talking about. So we're going to rave. I mean, there was one review of the podcast that was like, these guys seem to like everything. And it's like, you have no idea what, fell by the wayside somewhere else that we didn't talk about. Just because that's the way we wanted to do it from the beginning, is that, we're the place you're just going to hear what we loved and the people that we love to talk to, for better or for worse. That's just the niche we decided to go down.
Well, so then let me ask you this. What is it you guys think that you have an obligation to your fans, your readers, your listeners, those people that have built a relationship and trust of what your opinions are? So does that mean, you feel really an obligation to them on what you're doing, what you're telling them, and making sure that you're, being transparent with what you're doing?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like my blog is to talk to the reader. And I think giving them, transparency about, what we're doing, how we're getting the books, who we're working with, transparency, it's sort of interesting. LGBTQ romance is grown phenomenally, but it's still a small community and we all know each other. And so there's lots of authors that I know personally, that I have personal friends. And so I think keeping that transparency so people understand, we're not hiding anything here, being honest with them in our reviews, it's really important to me. I want people to not think, I wonder if, she's extolling the virtues here because, she wants to promote this book versus this is our honest opinion. And also just sort of a level of professionalism. I think I really try to treat the blog like a business, and, we want to be reliable. I have posts that go up at certain times every day, and my regular readers know, 7 a.m, there's going to be an author post, and that, at 9:30 a.m. is going to be the first review of the day, and just things like that, where I think that you can show them that, you're a professional business, whether you're monetizing or not, and that you're, going to provide them with something quality and something they can trust.
I agree. I have regulars who have been coming to my blog since we started it 11 years ago. And they send me emails and tell me that the reason they are a regular is because they trust me. Mm-hmm. They trust me to give them a fair and honest and unbiased review. They trust me to be transparent with them. As Jay said, if I have a personal relationship with an author, and being involved in this for as long as I have, I've developed several personal relationships with authors. I'll let them know that if I feel, and there's only been a couple of times this has happened, that I cannot be totally unbiased in my review, I'll do a spotlight and I'll tell them, this is my friend so-and-so, and this is their new book. I've read it. I loved it. But, I make it very clear that this is someone who is a personal friend of mine. And they've come to rely upon that.
Yeah, for us too, this is part of our overall business. The business that is our publishing side for fiction, and also the podcast is definitely part of that, because there's a little marketing thing here for us too. Because if you like the books we talk about on the show, odds are fairly decent you might actually like what we write too. Mm-hmm. And so the two things click together. But I think also there's a certain something about being in somebody's ear too. You can hear how enthusiastic we are about something. I think we would have a hard time selling you on the idea that we actually loved it, if we really didn't, because of just, that voice in your ear that's there every week. I think you hear our ups and downs potentially because of that. So I think, that part of the transparency is also important, to be genuine. And the followers that we have, I think they know what they're getting with us, because after all this time, they know the books that we tend to go down. And then every now and then, if we take a right turn into something else, we're like, oh, well, that was really interesting, and I picked it up because of your show, and suddenly you read this thing that was a little different. So it's all about trust and the way that it comes across, whether it's, in the podcast with the audio or in the written word, because, tone comes through in that as well for the different reviewers.
Well,
Absolutely.
That's one of the things I was going to ask about is, so when you're communicating in writing, people learn to recognize your style and the word choices, and they also learn to recognize the tone you use. But you can edit that, you can mask that. When you're if you're doing something like this, where I can see you, I can hear you, I can hear the inflection and the tone in your voice, I can see all the stuff that's going on. Do you find that more effective? Just a different level of communication? Is it something where you've got to kind of tone yourself a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on what medium you're using?
I think it's all very medium specific. Like when I try to blog, which happens periodically, it's a different tone. I was a journalist for years, so I know how to pitch the news story versus how I'm going to pitch the feature story, that kind of thing. But it's different than the podcast, especially because I work almost always with the co-host, because then we can bounce back off of each other too. So it's not just, talking into nothingness. It's the back and forth that he and I have too that plays into the show.
I think we can convey that through the written word as well, because when I write my reviews at my blog, I tend to be talking to my readers, and they can tell.
Yeah.
And when I finish writing a review and I go back and reread it, I can tell almost immediately, that this was a book that I loved, as opposed to a book that was good. Mm-hmm. But they can tell when I really, really, really love a book, just from the words I use, from the cadence of my speech in the review. Yeah, I think it's pretty evident, and they get to know your writing style over time, and so they're it's almost like you are talking to them.
Yeah.
What about you, Jay? I mean, because you're doing both some of the podcasting and showing up on Jeff's show, as well as writing, as well as curating, the other people contributing to your blog.
Sure.
So for you, how much of a difference is there for you in which way you're going to communicate and convey opinions?
Sure. I mean, we tend to have a fairly informal style, I think, on the blog. I mean, again, with 9 people, there is a range. But like PJ, I think that I try to be very conversational. And I think in general, the blog is very conversational in the sense of talking to the reader. So we, although I'm I have a journalism degree as well. So I'm an editor in my day job. So I'm very finicky about, grammar and type and making sure things read smoothly. And I edit every single review that runs, regardless of whether I wrote it. But at the same time, I think there's a very sort of casual conversational tone that we try to take with the idea that we're reaching out to the readers. And, when I do podcasts with Jeff, they're also very conversational. Jeff and I know each other well, and my other frequent guests with me, Lisa, and I also have been friends for years. So I think, again, that sort of tone is very similar in the idea of just sort of having a casual conversation with people.
And I think that tone, at least for me, that tone changes depending on where I'm posting my review. If I'm writing a review for my blog, it is that very conversational tone between me and the reader. If I'm writing a review for Amazon or for Goodreads or somewhere else, it's more of a formal, professional type of review. It's usually a shorter review. It's not as conversational, and it's always professional.
So let's actually shift a little bit more over into the business side of it. So from you guys' perspectives, Jeff, obviously this is part of your business. This is part of your marketing engine to do all the things that you're doing. So with you guys, are you monetizing your blogs? Are you monetizing it? And obviously, I'm assuming you're being upfront about how you're doing that and how that's coming across. So what approaches are you guys taking to actually approach this as a business? Even if you're not monetizing, it's still a level of professionalism to be able to have been doing it for this long of a period of time, to spend the time and the energy to build a following, all those other things. So what tools are you guys using in terms of monetizing? And also, does that fit into your growth for making sure you're growing your audience? Who wants to take that one first?
Right, I'll go ahead and start. Yes, we do. I do have, or I do monetize the blog. We do sidebar ads, and have, I want to say, probably for about 7.5 or 8 years now. And that's grown over time. I was thinking back to the first person who asked me, do you have a media kit that you can send me with your ad rates? And I was like, sure, it'll be right over. And then I'm like calling everybody, what do I do to make a media kit for my ad rates? So, it's grown considerably, over the course of the time that we've had the blog. So I do sell monthly sidebar ads, and fortunate enough that more than supports the cost of maintaining a blog of my size, because it's not, as I'm sure you guys all know, it is not inexpensive to pay for, hosting and security and design and the occasional help of a developer and all of the things that come with hosting a site. I just had a security problem today. My site crashed for 2 hours and I had to get it back up again. And so there's a lot that's involved. And so I'm lucky that I am able to support both the technical end as well as conference travel and other things for myself out of the blog expense, which is nice to be able to keep that separate from the family funds. And I think that for me, again, I mentioned professionalism, but I try to not only be very professional in my reviews, but also in my dealings with authors, because this is their business. This is their bread and butter. And, if I have a guest post booked for Monday, then that guest post is going to 100% run that Monday morning, and if it doesn't, I consider it a failure on my part. I mean, and it does not happen very often, let me tell you, but I really consider it a point of pride and professional integrity to hold up my commitments, to post when I say I'm going to post, to get the reviews to run, to make sure everything is edited and reads nicely, to keep things running for my readers, for my advertisers who are paying for my space. So I think that, even before I was getting advertising, that was important. But certainly now, where I have people who are paying for the right to be on my blog, I feel like I really owe them and my readers my 100% effort. And I really do try to give it, despite, my poor family who wonders how it's possible I could spend so many hours a week between reading and blogging. But, it's definitely a part-time job and not just a, hobby at this point.
Well, for me, I'm not monetized. I made the choice to do this purely for the love of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm retired, but I'm retired after a lengthy career, professional banking. And so everything I do associated with my blog, even though it is not a business, I run it as a business.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be professional in my demeanor, in my communications. I want to be reliable.
Mm-hmm.
As Jay said, if I commit to posting something at a certain time on a certain date, it will be posted at that time on that date. It may be a hobby, but I don't run it as a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us from the very beginning, we treated it as the business because it was part of our business. But we are monetized to a small degree. We have a Patreon, so we do have a community that supports us through that outlet, through either monthly or now yearly support through that channel. They get bonus content that is only available through that channel, and they get exclusive early access to certain things before they actually hit the podcast channel, the main podcast channel. And we've been running that now for, it's going to come up on I think its 4th anniversary in January. So that was something we started after the podcast had been going just over its first full year, because we didn't want to get into that until we knew we were going to be, sticking with it, if you will. We're also part of the Frolic Podcast Network. We were part of the founding set of shows that went into that network. And through them, we have started to pick up some advertising, and they're continuing to work to package all of the shows in the network, and it's more than a dozen, to get good advertising as you kind of combine, the full power of all of our shows together. So that's, an evolving part of the monetization machine. We're lucky in that our patrons, for the most part, we cover a lot of the basics, but they do help us buy new equipment too, when we choose to upgrade stuff along that side. So, it pays for itself, which is good. And then it's also, since it is part of the larger publishing things that we do, when we need to, we can also tap into the book sales as well, if we need to do something a little extra for the podcast for some reason.
Mhm.
So from that perspective and looking at it, and I think we've got a good mix here of how things are being done and monetized. If somebody was interested in thinking about, I want to start doing this, or maybe they've got a small blog and they're wanting to sort of start growing it, they've got a small book podcast, what advice would you have for them on starting it up, growing it, really pushing it, and going through kind of that engine? Because as all of you just said, it's work. It's a time commitment. It is an investment to make all of this work and bring it out there. So if somebody was thinking about doing this, what would you tell them?
I think one of the biggest things that you have to decide for a blog, and maybe this applies to a podcast as well, is whether your goal is to, first hobby your business. And, as PJ said, often you can sort of straddle that. It can be a very professional hobby, even if it's not ultimately a business goal. But sort of secondarily, for blog in particular, are you looking for an outlet for yourself personally, a place that when you read a book, you can write about it? Or are you looking for something that is going to bring other people on with you? Because I think that definitely changes the dynamic and the trajectory of how you're growing. In my case, I hit that point at about 8 months where I was either going to have to bring somebody else on, or I was going to have to cap sort of the growth of the blog, because there was just a limit to how much as one person I could possibly read. So I think that that's something that early on you sort of have to think through. Whether you want this to be a collaborative business. Are you comfortable having somebody else whose opinion may not be the same as yours write a review on your blog? I mean, I can tell you it happens to me frequently that I read reviews for books that I have a different opinion about, but my reviewer has read and rated it one way that I might disagree with. And you have to be comfortable with that, because this is their reviews. So I think that's one of the big things to think about early on, is sort of what your vision is. And then if you are looking to bring people on to work with you, thinking through, what your requirements are, what you're looking for in a reviewer. Some of my folks were people who I knew personally. Over the years, we've had some people come and go, although I think I've had my current reviewers for about 4 or 5 years now as a group. But some of them I've reached out to because they were frequent commenters, like you said, PJ, and I said, hey, you want to write for us? And in some cases, I put out a call for reviewers and asked people to sort of apply and read their writing. But regardless, I really look at their writing style. Lots of people are great writers, but their style just isn't a match for my blog. I have a very specific style. I'm a very bossy person. Jeff will not be surprised. I'm a very bossy person, and I have a way that I want it. It's my name on there, and I hold myself accountable for everything that goes out. So not everybody's interested in writing to that style or writing with my procedures. So that's something else that I think is important to think about, is what you're looking for in your reviews, and finding other people who are interested in writing in that same style and tone, and who are capable of doing that, because, everybody has a different vibe on their blog, and what matches for me might not be the way that you want to write.
And blogging might not be the way you want to go either.
Yes.
There are certainly other avenues for sharing your opinions on books. Instagram, for one, much shorter reviews, or sometimes it's simply, a photo, and without really much verbiage attached to it. But it's a great way to share your thoughts and opinions on the books that you're reading. I have a page on Instagram as well as the blog. I have an entirely different audience on Instagram, and I have found that it's very interesting to me, the people who frequent my blog and the people who frequent my Instagram account and what they are looking for. So unless you're comfortable with the commitment that needs to be made to be a successful blogger, and with being able to manage that blog, and if you have a review team, being able to manage people, because that's all part of the process, then perhaps you might want to take a look at some of those other avenues for sharing your opinions other than running a blog, because it is quite a time dedication.
For us, the key question as we started this was to really understand our why. Why did we want to do this? Why did we want to undertake this thing? And I think it's important, whether you're starting a review blog or whether you're starting a podcast or deciding to do Instagram or whatever that thing is, why are you doing it? How is it going to impact you, whether it's a hobby or something you're looking to take professional? Because if you're starting it, there's also the commitment that goes behind it. We've all talked about the importance of, having those expectations of our listeners or our readers about when we're going to be there, what we're going to show up with, and maintaining those expectations is crucial, because then you're going to mess up your followers if you start doing something that they don't expect, or if you disappear for no reason, or those kind of things. I mean, for us, doing 275 weeks of shows, well, that's not quite right from the week count, but doing 275 episodes on a schedule, we've never missed a Monday in over 5 years now. And that meant if we were traveling, we had a show in the bank. If we were going to do a show at a conference and put it out from the conference, or whatever that meant, that all kind of has to roll into your idea of, am I doing this or not? And how am I going to do it? Because you could always structure your expectations about what you can do, whether it's 1 post a week or 5 posts a week or 1 show a week or whatever that is. I also think you have to be realistic about the monetization too. And how fast you're going to grow a following. We really didn't hit our stride in terms of growth until we were most of the way through year 3. When we'd finally gotten enough notice to start to appear in places and people go, oh, this show over here. And it turned a corner at that rate, but you're not going to suddenly have, making your income on a blog or a podcast,
Absolutely.
maybe ever, but certainly not right out of the gate. Right. Because it's just not the way that this works for the most part.
Well, and there's also a certain degree of actually showing up long enough. I mean, part of the idea of followers showing up is seeing that you're consistent and doing things long enough for them to decide to invest the time in you. And I mean, I can tell you from a lot of people I know in a lot of different spaces, any kind of business, is customers, readers, fans, whether you are selling software, whether you are selling books, whether you're selling artwork, want to know, are you going to be there in a week?
Right.
Because especially with creative businesses, especially with creative outlets, it becomes that co-creation experience where you're building kind of that relationship, and you're building that degree of trust, even if it's a person you've never met. That's a time investment for them as well. And I think this is one of those things that people forget, is it's not all about you. It's about that relationship, even if it's a person you've never seen their name, heard of them ever, but they begin to feel a relationship with you.
I think it's I'm sorry, James, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it takes time.
Yeah. I think also something to think about early on, and something that certainly affects monetization, is what your niche is going to be and what your market is like, just like with any business. When I started a million years ago, the gay romance community was super tiny, like super tiny to the point that most of the authors were also publishers and readers, and half of them were bloggers. And I mean, everybody knew each other very well. And so it has grown tremendously, but it's still a small piece of the overall romance community. And so there's certainly, limits that come to how much I could charge for an ad, for example. We just don't have a community that has as many, huge New York Times bestsellers or huge, big five publishers, just because that's not the way this community works. So I think, partly in terms of a business, of how you're going to grow is going to depend to a degree on your market, but also I think that if you're thinking of starting a blog or a podcast or an Instagram or just being a really active Goodreads reviewer, part of it is thinking about what your space is going to be. We've broadened a little bit. We started out almost exclusively in gay romance. We've broadened, doing a lot more under the whole LGBTQ umbrella. We've broadened beyond romance to some nonfiction and other things. But we sort of made a very conscious decision not to step over too far into the general romance category. We review male-female romance when it's a series that has gay romance mixed into it. But that was my attempt to sort of control our niche, because right now, I mean, certainly when we started, but we were it's a small pond, and I didn't feel like I was ready or equipped to jump into the larger romance world without being completely swallowed up. And, I know that some folks will focus on maybe, just paranormals, or they're into, urban fantasy or something like that. So I think thinking about what your market is and where you can fit and what your interests are and how you can really make a big impression in a specific place rather than being a little bit of everywhere might help target that.
Yeah,
I think
the
that's
thing I was,
great.
sorry, go ahead.
I think that's great advice for when you're starting out. And then as you build your audience, you can make that decision. Do I stay within this niche, or do I begin to expand and introduce other types of books to my readers?
Yeah.
And as you start on your growth path too, I think it's important to revisit your why periodically to make sure that it still works for you. Will and I have that conversation probably every 6 months or so. Is this still working? Do we want to adjust it? What does that mean? And also know when to stop. We had a podcast that was author focused that we ran for about a year. 2020 really affected our creativity, and that affected that show. And we put it on hiatus, and we were very clear with the listeners, like, this is happening now. We are going on hiatus till at least the beginning of 2021, and we'll let you know what's going to happen. The content is still there. It's still valid content to leave out into the world. But for now, we're not going to produce this anymore. And there's certainly hundreds of thousands of podcasts that people go, "Hi, this is really fun." And then by episode 5, it's like, okay, I'm done because I can't do that anymore. So revisiting that why and stopping appropriately for your audience, I think is important too.
Another why that I revisit on a regular basis is the why of my readers. Why do they come to my blog? What do they enjoy about it? What are they getting from it? What are they not getting from it? And I try to do that once a year. And then I use that feedback from them to determine if I need to make any changes going forward to what I'm doing, if what I'm doing is working. Because it is a collaborative, I see it as a collaborative effort between me and the readers who are regulars, who visit my blog, who comment at my blog.
So if we now look at the other side of this, if I'm a writer coming to you guys and saying, can you review my book? From that side of things, what are your expectations of me as an author, both in what I'm going to deliver, and number two, And once you've written that review, what are you expecting of me? Or, if I'm coming on the show or something along those lines, what are you wanting from me as an author so that I get the best advantage of you taking the time to do the review? And number two, to help lift up and boost the show, boost the blog and everything else. So
Well,
what are your expectations of me?
if you're an author coming to me asking if I will review your book, number one, I expect you to give me enough time to read and review your book. Don't come to me a week before it publishes and say, hey, my book's coming out next week. Can you review it? Because I have way too many books already in the queue. I will never be able to get to it that quickly. So give me enough time. Once I review the book, I'm really not expecting anything from you, because that review is not for you. That review is for my readers. If you are doing a guest post, or if you're doing a Q&A with me at the blog, then yes, engagement would be great. And I do ask that of the authors, or at least encourage it, because many of the readers who are regulars at my blog have never attended a convention, have never attended a reader author event, have never attended an author book signing. Taking a few minutes out of their day, the author, to come to the blog and respond to comments on a Q&A will form a relationship with that reader and give that reader a vested interest in that author's work. And I have seen authors who are there the entire day responding to every single comment. I've seen authors who don't respond to a single comment. Those who do respond, those readers are much more apt to buy that book and to buy future books of that author. So that's something I would definitely encourage. Also, post about it on your social media. Just put a link out. Hey, I'm at so-and-so blog today doing a Q&A. There's a giveaway or whatever. Come on over and say hello. That goes a long way to help the author and the blog.
Jeff?
In terms of reviews, it's certainly helpful if you've paid attention to the show and maybe not even necessarily listen to the show, because you could come to the site and see what the books are that we're talking about and where our niches kind of fall between Will and myself. And if you can, especially if you're somebody we don't know, if you can come and say, my book is like this one and this one that you reviewed here, I think you might like it. That helps a lot to kind of categorize things for us. And don't hesitate if you're a new author, because we love finding new people and new authors to both lift up and to just frankly read for ourselves, because there's so many books out there. In terms of what you do after we review it, if you share it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. Because as was mentioned, the reviews are really for our audience. Certainly our reviews are always good reviews because of the nature of the show. So know that you're going to put something out there if you share it to your audience, that it's going to be a positive review. For coming on the show, because those slots are so, so few over the course of the year, if you are on the show, definitely share it, because it is possible in the nature of podcasting, and podcasting is still a growing thing, that there are people in your audience as an author who do not know we exist. And we really like for people who are on the show as guests to not only, share that they were on the show and share the material that we put out, because for our guests, we do audiograms. There's 2 or 3 audiograms that happen over the course of the week across social that highlights them being on the show.
I love
Perfect for sharing. So, retweet those, share those on Facebook, whatever the equivalent of re-Instagramming is. And help, not only say, here I am on this show, go hear what I might have had to say. Because that's one of the other things about our niche as a podcaster, that I think is so unique in the space is that you can hear from the authors. If you're not somebody who is able to get to a Coastal Magic or a GRL or a Book Lovers Con or whatever that is, the podcasts that are out there are a place you can actually hear the authors. If there's video involved, like there is for us, you can see the authors in many cases if they're willing to share to the camera. And it puts them out there in a way that is different than how they would be on their own blog or, even on their own Facebook. If they're doing Facebook Live, it's still different being interviewed and having that conversation than it is anywhere else. So share that.
I would say I would echo pretty much everything that PJ said. As far as reviews, again, I don't have expectations of authors either. I think that authors have to tread really carefully when they're in a review space. I personally don't have a problem with authors coming in and commenting, thank you for the review or whatever. But I know that there's a lot of bloggers who are very uncomfortable and do not want the authors in their space at all for reviews. So I think that it's worthwhile to be familiar with what the blogger thinks and if they're comfortable with that. And I think that authors need to tread lightly in terms of how they respond, particularly to reader comments in a review. So my expectations for an author really are, as PJ said, give me enough notice, recognize that we are often scheduling multiple weeks out. If you know that your book is coming out, January 20th, like now's the time to put your request in to say, hey, are you interested? I don't even need to have the book in hand till maybe, 2 weeks in advance, but if I know it's coming, I can mark it off. So my rule is it's never too early. I have a book for August on my calendar already. So it's never too early.
Oh, wow. I only go out to about May right now.
It's never too early to ask. As far as guest posts, I feel like those are two very different things. And I really try to separate them. We don't run reviews and promotion together in one post ever. I try not to even run them on the same day because I feel like reviews are us talking to the reader and a promotional post or a guest post is the author talking to a reader, and they're two different things. So I also, as all of us have limited space, I have a post a day. We fill up often weeks in advance with people who want the spots. And so what I'm looking for from an author is that win-win situation. I mean, it sounds very cliche, but if I am giving space and I'm promoting on my social media and I am giving you a forum to talk to my readers, then my expectation is that you are going to, and I'm professional and my post goes up when it says it does, then I expect you to provide the post when you say it's going to be provided, and that they will promote it just like I'm promoting. And while I'm promoting on my social media, you're doing the same, and that you're going to provide your content when you say you will without me having to call, at midnight checking why I don't have it yet. So I think that there has to be a mutual expectation of benefit. I'm getting something out of having these authors come. A great guest post for me is one where the author brings their readers. When I see commenters that I know are not my regulars, that right there is a sign to me that that author is bringing readers in. And I have authors who, honestly, I would give them a space every week if they asked, because they consistently bring their readers to the blog who are not regulars for me. And in return, I'm exposing my readers to them who might not know them. So there's a mutual benefit there. And I think that the authors who see it merely as an opportunity to push out content are the ones, well, first of all, who are not as enjoyable to work with, but also who aren't going to get as much out of that opportunity as the authors who really see it as a way to engage with these readers. If you're going to have a tour where you're going to have 100 blogs in a day who are all getting the same content, I don't think you're getting anything out of that, because after the second time as a reader, I realized that this blog has the exact content that that blog had. There's no reason for me to even go to the third. So those other 97 are, a waste. So I think thinking about what you want to get out of the stop and how you can engage with those readers for mutual benefit is going to get you more from a marketing angle and get you invited back more.
I agree.
So we're coming up on an hour here. It's gone by fast. Is there any one last thing you want to tell anybody that we haven't touched on? Everybody gets a closing word.
I would say start a podcast. There are still not a lot out there in the romance space, and there's so many variations you could take on it. You can go broad like we do and cover gay romance. You could get super niche and cover, steampunk vampire gay romance. I'm sure there's some of that out there somewhere, but find what you are into and take the leap. You could start for a relatively low amount of money. We certainly did. And go out there and, help to build the podcasting, ecosphere for books. It is growing, but there's tons of space out there. And if you got a unique voice and a unique take on the subject, go for it. Whether you're an author or a reader or, wherever you fall in that book space, take the leap and do it if you've got the slightest interest in it, and see what happens.
And I would say this is blogging is very much a labor of love. Whether you're making money or not, I can guarantee you are not making an hourly wage that would support you. Certainly not in the romance genre, and definitely not in the LGBTQ romance genre. So this has to be something that you love. And there's a lot of people out there who love reading. I am one of them. You have to love reading. You have to love talking about books. But if that's you, it's really so much fun. I love the chance to talk about books and share what I think and engage with readers. And, even now here 9.5 years later, I still love it. And it still gets me excited, even as I'm toiling away. So definitely worth it and a lot of fun.
I feel the same way. It's a great way to engage with other readers, to learn about other books, to meet authors, to expose yourself to writing styles and writing subjects outside of your comfort zone. It's a wonderful way to share your love of reading. It is a lot of work and it is time consuming, but the payoff, I think, is worth it. If that is what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you do have to have a love for it to make it last.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I very much appreciate you coming on and joining us on Continual. So if you can let everybody know where we can find you at, website, social media, all the good stuff. So PJ, we'll let you go first.
My blog is theromancedish.com. You can find me there most days during the week. I'm also active on Facebook at The Romance Dish, on Twitter at The Romance Dish, and Instagram at The Romance Dish.
Jeff.
BigGayFictionPodcast.com is the link to the show's website. We're on all the podcast outlets, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're on the brand new Audible. So you can even find this on your Audible app now to get your books and your audiobooks all mixed in there together. On Facebook, we are at, I think it's just Big Gay Fiction, and Twitter's Big Gay Fiction. And then Instagram's the weird one because it's Jeff and Will, because we had the Instagram account before we had the podcast. So, but all that's also linked up from the website for the show.
And Jay.
Yeah, the blog is Joyfully J at joyfullyj.com. I am on Twitter at some very weird handle, but I think you can find it also under Joyfully J. I'm on Instagram as Joyfully J. I have a personal /blog Facebook page called JHJ. The blog has a Joyfully J's review page. And I do have a Facebook group as well called The Joyful Jays, and that reposts all our blog posts. So if you join there, you can catch everything that's going on and all the other fun, and links to all of that is also in my blog at the top bar. You can connect to all our various social media.
And I'm Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net. And of course, here at the Continual Convention, I am on Facebook. Occasionally, I show up on the hive of scum and villainy that is Twitter. and occasionally I'll post stuff on Instagram as well. Want to thank everybody for joining us. And just remember, if you like what we're doing, please do, share it out, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.